Hello, this is Cynthia Sue Larson with RealityShifters.com, and today I'd love to talk with you about shifting your perspective to a positive direction. I was recently asked a question by someone who wrote in and inquired what people can do to survive the current weird environment. This query continued: we really need to shift our reality away from negativity and fear. It's funny because as I type this, you're saying in the background on YouTube, ask the good questions. Right, so that's someone who's watching this channel, obviously. And what I'd like to start with is that we all have an ongoing conversation with the cosmos. We often don't think much about it, but it's happening all the time. Literally all the time. And even when you don't think you're doing it, your subconscious is conversing with the cosmos, which is one of the main things that I like to emphasize about asking that question, how good can it get? Because when you're asking how good can it get, you're less likely to start seeing what next and all the things that can go wrong, which tend to start spiraling downward pretty quickly. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then just start paying attention to this. Try it like in a thought experiment and see what happens. Let me know. I'd love to hear about it, especially when it goes well, because I love to keep asking how good can it get, not just for each of us, not just for me, but for all of us. So this conversation with the cosmos is something that came to the attention of physicist John Archibald Wheeler. I've mentioned previously that he is related to me indirectly, sort of a distant cousin, but that's not the reason I'm interested in the idea that he was proposing. He actually talked about a participatory cosmos and universe. And what he said was, we are not only observers, we are participators. In some strange sense, this is a participatory universe. And this is a wonderful concept, at least I think it is, because it provides us with a basis by which we can literally be the scientists that I'm talking about now. And we can conduct personal experiments. We can try it in our own lives for best results. Keep asking how good can it get. If you happen to notice when you wake up or at some point in the day, your energy is not quite as high as you would like it to be. Or maybe you're starting to obsess with something you heard or thinking about that's just taking you in that downward spiral. And even when you ask how good can it get, it seems like you're just kind of spiraling downward. So if that starts happening, there are some things you can do to pull yourself up by the proverbial bootstraps. Now, if you practice something like Qigong, yoga, Tai Chi, some kind of internally focused martial art, definitely get back into your practice. This is the time to start feeling the difference that your breath can make. Some people are studying Wim Hof, and it's literally thousands of years old technology that shamans, yogi practitioners, and martial artists have been doing for thousands of years. So it works. What does it do? When you breathe more slowly, to your lower abdomen in particular, you can actually start feeling yourself calming down. And one simple thing, it seems too easy to even work, but it's very powerful. You can take a breath in, just a nice deep slow inhalation, and then just make sure when you breathe out, you're breathing out maybe 1.5 to 2 times as slowly as when you breathed in. Just do that the first time, and then you'll notice, wow, I can breathe even more slowly than I was. Let yourself find that natural, slow rhythm that works for you. And in the simple process of watching your breath, you might be surprised to be feeling a little bit better right there. In addition, getting back to physics, there's something called the observer effect, which, as you know, if you've been tracking this channel, you've seen there are lots of experiments that go back quite a long time to the double slit experiment, considered one of the most classic experiments in all of science. And what that experiment did is it showed the way that you can literally catch or observe a particle acting like a particle when you set up a particle detector, and you can establish proof that that was actually a wave when you set up a wave detector. That's really simplifying, perhaps overly, but it gives you the idea, and you can refer to previous videos from this or other channels for more details. But when we get into this observer's perspective effect, that's where we're starting to refine it a little bit more, and we're taking a little bit of a influence and suggestion from the work of John Archibald Wheeler. What if this is a participatory universe? What if the simple question we're asking is setting everything up so we find what we're looking for? Well, when that's the case, that reminds us that maybe we don't want to be focusing on some of the stuff we grew up preoccupied with. such as drama, basically. And the emotions that we know we're off track when we start feeling anxious, like the person that wrote to me, fearful. And this is where I'd like to bring in just an example of going to a higher perspective is the idea here, that we can become positive observers. And we're going to do that by just taking some steps back. The deep breath helps. Another thing that helps is remembering that you can take a dimensionally higher point of view than the one you're currently in. If you think about something like Flatland, I've got Waldo hiding in this picture. Where's Waldo? I think you spotted him instantly. If not, I'll bring it closer. Waldo's that red character with a shirt that's very identifiable. And that's a blueprint. Now, if this blueprint, this flat, two-dimensional picture, actually it has a dimension of width, but we're going to pretend for our purposes this is 2 dimensions. In other words, the only beings that can possibly maneuver around on this plane of existence would be dots, lines, circles, squares, triangles, anything that fits in that very flat plane of 2-dimensional space. Now, if they're on that 2-dimensional plane and they're trying to find Waldo, it could take quite a while to locate him. They don't know even if he's in this house. We know he's in this house. They don't know if they're going to see him when they first come in the walkway. We know they're not, that we can see where he is. They don't have the advantage of that perspective. If you're stuck on a lower dimensional perspective, you are constrained by your ability to sense and perceive anything at a higher level. So that's the idea that gives you permission to realize that you can rise up out of anxiety, out of fear. And what's above anxiety and fear? Well, we know these things based on the work of psychologists who've started with transactional analysis, and then it moved into something called the Karpman drama triangle. You can look that up if you like, and you get the idea very quickly that that drama triangle is a triangle, and it's got some kind of a persecutor at the top, who's the bad guy, the victim, who's being unfairly punished, and then the rescuer, who's constantly anxious and worried about what's next, what's next, what's next. So if you find yourself in any of those roles, you can also identify them by the emotion. Again, persecutor at the top, that being is very angry typically, feeling righteous anger about something. The rescuer, as I said, is worried, anxious. The victim tends to be sad, sometimes going into depression. So we don't really want to end up in any of those emotions for a long time, because it can be like quicksand. In this case of the drama triangle, scientists have noticed that people tend to move around like it's a merry-go-round. Usually they start as a victim, move into rescuing, often end up accidentally as persecutors. And so it starts with a feeling of sadness, moves into anxiety and fear, and then ends up angry. You don't need to get stuck that way. It's not necessary. And what you can do is you can recognize that we all are part of something much bigger. This cosmos was here before we came here in the bodies that we're currently in, and it will continue after we're gone. That means we can take that deep, steady, slow breath and just breathe in and feel this is good. We're good just right here, right now. There may be things wrong, but we're not going to focus on that right now. We're just going to focus that right here, right now, everything's okay. And from there, you can start recognizing that it's possible. Whichever merry-go-round point you might notice, like I think I'm maybe feeling anxious and fearful. That tends to be the gateway one. Usually that's the one where people start to notice there's something going on that doesn't need to be happening. Unfortunately, for people locked into anger, they can get stuck there sometimes. Not always, but it's typically, there are some pathways in the body to reinforce that, so it becomes very addictive, like taking some kind of drug. Anger can be like that. Sadness and depression can be quite serious and quite incapacitating as well. So the big escape route is those of you who are feeling anxious. That's the good news today. And what you can do is just recognize that there is that bigger cosmos, and then whatever sense of spirituality you have, even atheists can feel like this. There was something here before we got here. If you believe in God, that's wonderful. Then you know, absolutely, there was something here before I got here. And you can ask and start interacting with the cosmos on the deepest level of your being, aware that you can ask, I'm ready to rise up out of this anxiety. I'm ready to feel vulnerable instead of sad, for example. So that depression and that sadness, it's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay to recognize things are a little bit beyond our control. If they're in our control, we can make a to-do list. We can find ways to move forward. The stress that seems to lock us into these patterns on the drama triangle happens when we think we should be able to do something, but we can't. That's where I recommend give it to God, give it to the cosmos, and just recognize God and the cosmos do the heavy lifting. All we need to do is show up and gratefully ask for assistance in getting lifted out of that sadness into vulnerability, lifted out of that anxiety into caring. There's a difference. When you're feeling anxious, it's sort of like you can hovercraft your way in and butt into somebody's business and do things that nobody asked for help with in the first place and actually make it worse. So we don't want to do that. We want to just be caring. And then when you're feeling that anger and you want to move out of that, you can move into assertiveness, which is the whole idea that you're saying, this is how I feel, this is what I need, this is what I see, but you're not foisting it on people. You're working collaboratively. So these are the big ideas today, and I think it's all summed up in this picture. Remember, you don't have to be stuck in anxiety. If you feel like you're boxed in, remember you're not really. If you were Waldo in that 2D world, that flatland world, you realize, wait a minute, Waldo's bigger than 2 dimensions. The idea of Waldo certainly is, and for those of us in 3 dimensions plus time, we can spot him in a moment. And that's the advantage that we all possess when we realize no matter what level of the problem we're in, we can rise up to a higher level of consciousness and awareness and dimensional perspective and absolutely get all of the assistance we need to no longer be caught in any of these drama cycles or stress cycles of any sort. So until next time, I hope you'll join me in asking, how good can it get? This is Cynthia Sue Larson with realityshifters.com. Thanks so much.